History is a series of lessons we are notoriously poor at learning. We gravitate toward the bad examples while the extraordinary remains buried under the anesthesia of time. To understand the architect of the first global empire, we must run the clock back to the Aryans. While the word has been hijacked by 20th century ideology, we must take it back. 4,000 years of history cannot be erased by a single madman's interruption. The Aryans emerged from a geography of fire, leaving a trail of temples from Kazakhstan to the south, each younger than the last, a migratory breadcrumb trail. They did not merely domesticate the horse, they reimagined it. For millennia, the horse was a food supply, a slow-moving calorie. The Aryans realized that if you jumped onto its back without saddle or stirrup, clutching a fistful of mane, you became something post-human. From this elevated position, the physics of violence changed. Charging a man on foot, you swing a club at his head while he is reduced to swinging at your leg, a bad transaction for the other guy. If the odds were poor, you rode away. If the enemy fled, you ran them down. This was the birth of the kinetic advantage, a transformation fueled by the bow, the spear, and the horse. Small groups living in marginal lands suddenly possessed the tools to conquer the world. They named the plateau after themselves, Iran, the land of the Aryans. But they did not stay in one place. One branch claimed 70% of India. Another stayed, becoming the Persians, Kurds, and Pashtuns. A third ventured into the Caucasus, eventually spilling into Europe. These were the Celts, who took a counterintuitive route through Iraq, Palestine, and Egypt. In the sands of Iraq, they discovered the bagpipe, the most beautiful sound ever made, and carried it across North Africa to the Straits of Gibraltar, leaving a trail of music that survives in Tunisia to this day. They became the Gauls of France, the Galicians of Spain and Poland, and the Galatians of Turkey. They were the minority conquerors whose DNA was slowly absorbed by the majorities they ruled, until only the Basque remained as a pocket of resistance. This is the deep background of the man who would eventually redefine the meaning of power. By the 7th century BC, the Iranian plateau was a spectrum of human behavior. In the north, stretching across Russia and Ukraine, lived the Saka, the Scythians. These were the Iranians who remained uncivilized by southern standards. They drank wine mixed with ephedra, a potent stimulant, out of human skulls. Their bodies were maps of scars and tattoos. Moving south, the culture refined itself until it reached the Persians, a people so obsessed with decorum, they refused to speak while eating and viewed bodily functions as a failure of discipline. Between these extremes sat the Medes. They were the middle ground, eating with their hands, but carving out a state that challenged the monstrosity of the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrians were ruthless, glorious in their art and brutal in their victories. They had stolen the horse technology of the Aryans and used it to dominate the world from Egypt to western Iran. But by 685 BC, the seams were fraying. Sovereignty was returning to the Medes, and the Persians were their satellite state. Into this world stepped a figure of legend, Achaemenids, the founder of the Achaemenid dynasty. Whether he was a man or a retrospective myth created by later kings remains a debate, but his lineage led directly to Cyrus II, known to us as Quraysh. Our understanding of Cyrus is filtered through the mirrors of his observers. To the Greek mercenary Xenophon, he was the perfect leader, a student of Socrates' philosophy, even if Xenophon's own accounts are colored by his survival of the 10,000. To Herodotus, Cyrus was a villain to be trashed, a target for myths repurposed to please an Athenian audience. Yet, even through the bias of history, a pattern emerges. Cyrus was the product of a marriage between two worlds. His father was Cambyses, a Persian king, and his mother was Mandana, daughter of the Median king Ishtuvigu. This lineage made him a grandson of the very empire he was destined to dismantle.
Brothers and sisters, if you are enjoying our content so far, please show your support by clicking like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And in return, we promise to keep improving our video content.
While Cyrus was coming of age, the world was undergoing a tectonic shift in the nature of value. On the western coast of Turkey, the Ionian Greeks and the Lydians were opening a black box that would change human economics forever: currency. Before the coin, there was only the nightmare of barter, trying to trade a bolt of linen for eggs, only to find the egg dealer wanted salt. Wealth was hard to measure, and the line between a slave and an employee was paper thin. Both were given food, clothing, and shelter. The only difference was the right to quit. But the coin changed the chemistry of labor. Now you could pay a man, and he could buy his own life. King Croesus of Lydia, Cyrus's relative by marriage, became the first man to figure out how to separate gold from silver in electrum. He became filthy rich, his wealth so legendary it remains a proverb. But wealth is a fragile shield against fate. This was the lesson the Athenian sage Solon tried to teach him. Solon had been brought in to save Athens from a terminal civil war. The city was dying, its people fleeing house-to-house violence. Solon designed a republic, a system where factions could argue in a legislature instead of killing each other in the streets. When the people tried to make him king, he left the city, refusing to let his presence wreck the republic's chance to survive the people's own stupidity. He traveled to Lydia, where Croesus flaunted his piles of gold, and asked who was the happiest man on earth. Solon refused to name him. He spoke of soldiers who died in battle, and sons who died serving their mothers. "We will know if you were happy when you die," Solon told the king. "Until then, your story is untold." It was a warning that the Oracle of Delphi would soon echo with cryptic malice. If Croesus crossed the river, a great empire would be destroyed. He assumed it was the Persians. It was his own. Cyrus did not want to be a mere vassal king of Anshan. He wanted Persia. But to take it, he had to confront his grandfather, Ishtu-Vigu, the king of the Medes. Cyrus had lived with the old king since he was 6. Ishtu-Vigu had taught him to hunt, to eat with his hands in the Median style, and had shared with him the secrets of battle tactics, history, and philosophy. They loved each other. This made the betrayal a necessity of state. Cyrus marched into Persia and captured his father's cousin, knowing the Median army would come to straighten him out. He knew he couldn't win a fair fight, so he set a trap in a narrow mountain pass on the road to Pasargadae. The Medes, shocked by the audacity of their own prince, were routed. Cyrus chased his grandfather to the gates of Esfahan and defeated him a second time. When the old king came out under a white flag, he asked the question that defines the tragedy of leadership. "Why have you done this to me?" Cyrus's response was a masterclass in the new logic of empire. "I love you," he told his grandfather, "and I will not hurt you. I will not cut off your ears or your pride. You will remain king of the Medes. But we are no longer separate. We are partners in a single state." It was the weirdest surrender in history. Two kings of equal power, joined in a marriage of kingdoms. Cyrus understood that the stability of his reign depended on this bizarre equality. With the Medes and Persians united, he turned his gaze toward the horizon. The Assyrian Empire had imploded, replaced by the Neo-Babylonians who had dragged the Jews into captivity and leveled the Temple of Solomon. But before he could deal with Babylon, he had to secure the north. He had to deal with the ghosts of the steppe, the Amazons. The myth of the Amazon is rooted in a trauma that the Greeks never forgot. During the wars in Urartu, a division of Scythian women archers, warriors on speed and wine, snapped. They marched west, sacking Greek city-states and burning temples until they vanished back into the steppe, leaving behind a boogeyman story that would fuel Greek art for centuries. Cyrus and Ishtu-Vigu conquered Urartu and moved into Cappadocia, a landscape that defies the imagination. This expansion triggered Croesus of Lydia. Believing the oracle's promise of victory, he attacked the Persians at Pteria. The battle was a draw, a horrific slaughter that forced Croesus to retreat to his capital, Sardis. He gathered an army twice the size of Cyrus's, some say 400,000 men, including Babylonians and Egyptians. At the Battle of Thymbra, Cyrus revealed his tactical genius. He arranged his smaller force into a V shape, enticing the Lydian cavalry to charge his flanks. In the center, he had built massive wooden towers to give his archers a superior vantage point. When the Lydian cavalry committed, Cyrus launched his own horsemen into their exposed sides. The larger army was destroyed. Croesus surrendered, and in keeping with the Cyrus pattern, he was not executed. He was offered a seat in the cabinet, but the transition was not seamless. A Lydian named Pactius, entrusted with the king's gold, used it to hire mercenaries and rebel. Cyrus sent his generals to crush the resistance and incorporate Anatolia into the empire. But the conquest came with a revolutionary promise. The conquered were not subjects, they were partners. They were told to keep their languages, keep their religions, and enjoy the rights of Persians. The state coffers were plundered, but the individuals were not. This was the birth of a federal system built on the celebration of diversity. In 539 BC, Cyrus turned his attention to the last big boy in the neighborhood, the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Babylon was the largest city ever built, a metropolis of 200,000 people protected by walls that seemed impregnable. Rather than waste lives on an earthen ramp, Cyrus used the river. His engineers cut a canal, rerouting the Tigris until the water level dropped below a man's waist. The Persian army simply marched through the riverbed, through the hole in the walls, and the city surrendered without a fight. Under the Temple of Marduk, Cyrus placed an object that would echo through the UN building in New York, the Cyrus Cylinder. Written in Babylonian cuneiform, it was the world's first Bill of Rights. It limited the power of the state. Cyrus banned human sacrifice, a practice common from Rome to the temples of Zeus. He banned slavery, though he maintained a system of serfdom, a thin but vital distinction where individuals were tied to the land but owned their production and could not be bought or sold like cattle. He told the empire that diversity was its strength. While the Romans would later demand total assimilation, Cyrus demanded only partnership. If we have one culture and a crisis hits, we have one answer, he believed. But if we have 50 cultures, we have 50 answers, and maybe one will be good. He sought out the captive Jews and told them their captivity was over. He didn't just let them go. He offered to pay for the reconstruction of their temple with Persian gold. When they showed him the plans for the second temple, he saw they needed to build a mountain, a massive mesa. He hired the only people who knew how to build mountains, Egyptian engineers. It was a monument of Persian gold and Egyptian skill, built for a Jewish god by a Zoroastrian king. He was a man who was, quite impossibly, sincere. Cyrus was an old man, perhaps 70, when he led his final campaign into the graveyard of empires, Afghanistan and the northern steppes. He was hunting the Saka, the same people who had birthed the Amazon legends. He killed their kings, but in doing so, he drew the wrath of two queens, Spareta and Tomyris. They set an ambush for the aging emperor. The Persian army, which had conquered from Palestine to Pakistan, was defeated. Cyrus was killed in the dirt. Tomyris, seeking vengeance for her fallen family, found his body and cut off his head. She plunged it into an animal's skin filled with wine, a grim fulfillment of her promise to give him his fill of blood. He died as he had lived, fighting the very diversity he sought to incorporate. His empire survived him, expanding into Egypt and Libya. But its heart remained the council of men who debated whether the future should be a democracy, a republic, or a monarchy. They chose the crown, but the seed of the individual had been planted. Today, the text of the Cyrus Cylinder is inscribed above the door of the UN building in 6 languages. It remains a haunting what if for our species. Cyrus believed in a world of confederacies, of trade and cultural exchange. A vision that modern history has often traded for the fun stories of World War II and the brutality of industrial conquest. We look at our modern leaders and see a vacuum where sincerity used to be. The pattern repeats: the migration, the technology, the hero, and the inevitable return to the earth. Cyrus was the architect of a future we are still too primitive to inhabit. We are the inheritors of his coins and his wars, but we have yet to master his grace.
Brothers and sisters, if you are enjoying our content so far, please show your support by clicking like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And in return, we promise to keep improving our video content.